Welcome. In this video, we'll be doing the actual user account creation on the server. Several videos we've had before now, like creating database schema, creating email transporter, verifying user data on the front end. All of those are for a preparation towards this video. So it is this video that we actually do the user account creation using their provided details, name, email, password, and yes, just password. Confirm password is just to ensure that the user is sure of what they are providing. Okay, so we've done the front end validation. So the first thing we'll be doing on the server is to also validate the data that the user is providing, because even though we've done validation on the front end, we can still not totally trust the data we'll be getting from our user. Okay, so we are going to go to our server action now. If you are not using Next.js, possibly you are using Node, you are using Django, or whatever it's your favorite backend framework, just create an endpoint where you'll be receiving the user data. And then the first thing we are going to be doing is to validate the user provided data. Okay, and just as a heads up, all right, this video is going to be a little bit lengthy because we are going to be handling numerous procedures, numerous processes, numerous stages. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is to validate our user data. After validating the data, if it is valid, then we need to check if the user already has an account in our database. Okay, so we check that with the user's provided email. If there is an existing account on that email, then we need to undo the existing accounts. If the existing account has a local authentication method, which is the same as this method, then we need to return an error to the user that there is already an existing user on an already existing account on this email. Okay, but before we respond with an error, we also need to verify if the email has been verified. If the email has not been verified, rather than returning an error, we are going to redirect the user to a verification page. Okay, we'll create the page very soon. All right, and if the user does not have a local authentication method on their existing account, that means the user has already registered with either Google or Github. So we need to handle that scenario also. If any of these scenarios are not true, that means the user does not have any existing accounts with us. All right, so we'll be handling that scenario also. So we have a few steps we need to take care of. Okay, and in Next.js, if you want to mark a file or a function as a server action, you need to use the directive use server. So that is going to mark every function that is going out of this file as a server action. Okay, first off, let me get rid of this console log. Now, first off, we are going to be or let me say second off, if that is first off, we are going to be validating our user data. Okay, so I'm going to say validated user is going to be, okay, that's going to be a sign up schema dot save pass. Okay, and we're going to pass raw data to that. So here we're going to check if the validation is successful. All right, if it is not successful, then we're going to return an object. Success is going to be false. Okay, false. All right, and then we're going to have an errors property, which is going to be an object. Side of that, we're going to have this. Okay, so this is going to be an array of string. Okay, so we're going to say an error occurred. Okay, even though it's data validation error, but we are not expecting this to have occurred in the first place because we validated this on the front end. So if there is a validation error here, that means our user is malicious. So we are not going to tell them what the error is specifically. Okay, or rather than doing that, let's just format the error that we're getting from Zod. Okay, so we're going to say validated user dot error. It's going to be dot error dot format, so that what we are doing is consistent with the data validation we did on the front end. Okay, and our data is just going to be the raw data that the user sent to us. Okay, I think that should be good for that. Now, after validating user provided data, okay, this closes this. Okay, so we are going to be checking if the user already has an account with us. So with the checking, let's first destructure the data we're getting from our validated object. Okay, so we're going to have email, all right, email. Okay, what else? We have password and then the name of our user. So we are getting that from validated user dot data. All right, now this is where we are going to check if the user is already existing in our database. So we're going to have a variable with the name of client. So client is going to be of data type pool client. We'll be getting that from the PG, the Postgres node package. Okay, this is or null. Okay, so as default value, we'll be using null. All right, and after that, we're going to have another variable. We're going to call that existing users. Okay, this is going to be of data type user row. We are going to create the that data type now. All right, so an array of user row, should we call it like this? Yeah, let's leave it like that. So let's come to the top here and then we're going to define that data type. Okay, so we're going to have type, then we're going to have user row. So or let's just use interface for that. Okay, so we have interface. It's still the same if you use type. All right, okay, so this is going to be an ID of data type number. All right, and what else? We need the email verified. These are the column we'll be fetching from our database. So this is going to be boolean. All right, and then we are going to have auth providers. We also need this array. Okay, so it's going to be an array of local, Google, and GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to have local. All right, so that is going to be the data will be fetching from our database. Okay, now we need to check our database. It's going to be an asynchronous operation, so we are going to be using the try catch statement. All right, so we're going to say client is going to be await, then we are going to import pool. That is the database pool we created in this file. Let me import that. So this pool we created is going to be a pool of database connections. All right, so first off, we're going to extract one connection from the database pool. So we have pool.connect. That is going to give us one connection. All right, so after getting a connection from the connection pool, this is where we're going to check if user exists in database. Let's just use db. Okay, so we're going to have const rows. Okay, it's going to be await, then we're going to have a client dot query. That's going to be query. Okay, so we're going to write our query here. Okay, so our query is going to be select. Okay, what are we selecting? ID, email verified, and they want to select auth providers. Okay, so where are we selecting that from users table? Okay, where email, since we want to use email to filter our users, so we are going to be providing the email as a parameter. Okay, to avoid SQL injection. All right, so we are going to provide our email as a parameter. Okay, so after getting the user, we need to assign the user to the existing user variable. I'm going to have existing users is equal to rows. All right, this row is going to be an array of user objects. Each object in the array is going to be standing for each user. Okay, so now if there is an error while executing this query, we are going to console. We need to this is just for development, so that it will be easy for us to debug if there is an error here. So I'm going to say an error occurred in production. You don't need this console login. All right, okay, since there was an error, if there is a connection that has already be acquired from the pool, we need to release that connection back to the pool. Okay, so we have client dot release, that is going to release that connection back to the pool so that it will be available for use for the next database operation. Okay, so we need to return a state back to our front end. Okay, so first off, the success is going to be false because an error occurred. Okay, and our errors property is going to be an object, and inside of that object we are going to have these errors. Okay, and it's going to be an array of string. So we're going to say an error. All right, and then we need to pass the submitted data back to the user. Okay, so we have our email, we have our password. Okay, there is supposed to be a colon at this point. All right, so we also have the confirm password. We need to pass all of this back to the front end so that the front end can use it to persist the data in the form. All right, so we are just assigning password back to confirm password since they are both the same values anyway. Okay, since we did not destructure confirm password at this point. All right, and let me save that. And in different other places we'll be returning this same error structure. So rather than retyping this over and over again, I'm going to assign this to a variable. Okay, so let's come to this point. Rather than retyping that, we'll still be using same error response. Okay, so let's just call it generic error response. All right, it's going to be of data type action result. The action results we defined when we were creating this server action. Okay, so we're just going to return generic error response. So rather than typing and retyping that in the other places we'll be using it, we are just going to be using that variable. Okay, so now we've gotten our user from the database. Now let's check if the user already has a local authentication method. Okay, so we are going to come here. Then I'm going to have a conditional statement. So that's if statement. All right, so the condition is going to be if existing users dot length is greater than 0. So if this existing users, if it has any object at all as its element, that means there is an existing user with that email. Okay, and then we are going to check if that existing user has local auth method as part of their auth provider array. So we're going to say existing users. Okay, we are going to get the first object in that array, and then inside of that object we're going to have auth providers. Then we're going to check if the auth providers array, if it includes this is going to be local. All right, so if the auth provider arrays from this existing user, if it includes the local auth method, that means the user has a local authentication method already. So now after that, we are first going to check if the user email has been verified. So we can just say our user is equal to existing users. So that's going to get a user from the array. Okay, since the user already has an account with this local auth method, that means we don't need a database connection anymore. So we're going to release the database connection back to the pool. Okay, now we are going to check if the user email has been verified. Okay, so we're going to say if this is going to be under conditional statement. So I'm going to say if user dot email verified is not true, that means the user email has not been verified. We can just redirect from this point. Okay, so we're going to use the redirect function from Next.js. Okay, then we're going to pass the path that we want to redirect to. Okay, so we're going to call this verification required. We are going to be creating the page later on. Okay, verification required. All right, and then we're going to be passing some params. So this type is going to be sign up. We use that to differentiate if it is either a sign up process or a sign in process. Okay, and the email of the user. Okay, so I'm going to say the email is do some interpolation here. What is the problem? Okay, this is supposed to be $sign. All right, so I'm going to pass the user provided email to standardize this, we can just use the encode URI component function. Okay, you can use your email and you can use this function. We're still going to achieve the same result. All right, so if the user email is not verified, we redirect them. But if this condition is not true, that means the user already has a local authentication method and their account has already been verified. So in that case, we'll be returning an error message back to the user that there is already an account with this email. Okay, so I'm going to say success is false. We did not create any account for you. Okay, and the errors is going to be an object. So we're going to have underscore errors, and the error message, we're going to have a string here. Is going to be account already exists with this email. All right. Okay, so we're going to say please log in instead. All right, and the data is going to be the same data that the user sent to us. So we can just copy that from a generic error response. Okay, just going to copy this. All right, and then where are we at this point? Just going to paste that in here. All right, now we've successfully undone any user that already has a local authentication method. So next, now we need to handle users with other authentication method, possibly Google OAuth or Github OAuth. Okay, so at this point we're going to have another conditional statement. We're going to have if statement. Okay, the condition is going to be almost same as the previous condition. So if existing user dot length is greater than 0, that means there is an existing user. But if there is no local auth in their auth provider, so we're going to negate this condition. Okay, so if there is an existing user but there is no local auth method in their auth providers, so that means we have an existing user but it is not local. It can be either Google or GitHub or both. Okay, so this is where we are going to undo such condition. So what we are going to do is since the user is already in the database, all we need to do is to just add the local auth method to the user. Okay, so add local auth method to existing user. Okay, so we are going to be doing that with a different function so that this block is not overpopulated. We're going to create a custom function for that. So the function is going to be returning the authentication token because we are going to be sending a verification mail to the user, and this one is going to be error, just in case an error occur when we are adding the local method to the user. Okay, so we are going to call the function add local. So as arguments, we are going to be passing the database connection. Then we're going to pass the existing user's ID. Okay, so we're going to say dot ID. All right. As argument, we're also going to be passing the email and the user provided password. Okay. So now let's define our function. I'm just going to copy the name of the function. Then I'm going to go down here. All right. So we're going to create an asynchronous function. Okay, synchronous function. So this is going to be the name, and as parameters, what are the things we accepted? We accepted the database connection client. So we have clients. The type is pool client that is coming from the PG package. Okay, what other? We also accepted the user ID. Okay, what else? We also accepted the user email and the password. This is not going to fly. The user ID is going to be number. All right, the email is going to be string. Okay, and the password is going to be string. Okay, so now first off, let's create the verification token that will be using to verify the user's email. So token is going to be from a random byte from crypto. So ensure you import that. VS Code is going to do that for me. Okay, so I need 64 random bytes. Then I'm going to convert them to string using hexadecimal, to be represented with hexadecimal characters. Okay, so now I need to update the user entry in the database. All right, so that is going to be a synchronous operation, so we need to use the try catch statement. Okay, so the first thing is to hash our user password. We will not be saving the password as a plain text, so we can call it hashed password. Okay, so we're going to be using the bcrypt package for that. Bcrypt, the spelling is kind of funky. Okay, so bcrypt.hash, we need to import the bcrypt package. So let's just go to the top of our file. It's supposed to auto import. That is not working. So we're going to have bcrypt, okay, from, it's supposed to be b, not by, from bcrypt.js. Okay, so now we're going to come here, right? So now let's see if the hash okay, so it's working now. Then we need to provide the user provided password and then the factor. Okay, so that's going to hash our password. Now we need to start a database transaction because we'll be performing two queries, and we want both queries to either be successful together or they fail together. Okay, so we'll be using transaction for that. All right, so the first thing is we're going to be adding local auth method to the existing user. Okay, all right, so we're going to have a wait because it's an asynchronous operation. So we have our client dot query. Okay, so we're going to write a query here. Okay, so let's provide our query first. Okay, so since there is an existing user, so what we need to do is to update that existing user, update users table. Okay, so what are the things we want to update? We're going to have set. The first thing we want to insert, we want to update is the password hash column. Okay, so we have password hash. Okay, and that is going to be the first parameter we'll be providing. All right, and the second column is going to be email verified. So email verified, now we're going to set it to false. It is null as default. Okay, and the last column will be update is going to be auth providers pro. Okay, so since there is an existing array, so we're just going to append array append auth providers. So we are adding local to it. Okay, then we're going to pass the local as data type auth provider, the custom data type that we define when we're creating a database schema. Okay, so now we're going to write our where clause. That is what we use to filter the actual user we want to update. So we'll be filtering it with the user ID. To format this, we can bring this in, break this in. Okay, that's good to go. And then we're going to be providing the parameters. The first parameter is the hashed password. Okay, and the second parameter is the user ID, which we received as a parameter. This is not supposed to be here. All right, and we also need to put a comma here. Okay, so we are good to go with updating the user entry. Now we need to create an entry in the email verifications table. Okay, so that we are going to use that to verify our users email. Add email verifications. We are going to await, and we have our client dot query. Okay, so we need to insert into the email verifications table. Insert into email verifications. All right, so what we are inserting to these columns: user ID, okay, email, okay, token, okay, and the expires at column. All right, so what are the values? These are the values we want to insert into those columns. Okay, so it's going to be 1. We're going to provide in all those as parameters, but else email token is also going to be as a parameter. All right, and expires at, we're going to use now plus, now is going to be a function, okay, plus 15 minutes interval. Okay, so we have interval, then we have a 15 minutes. Okay, so that entry is going to expire after 15 minutes. Okay, don't forget that for your SQL queries you need to be closing them with semicolon. All right, but because this package, this PG package we are using is going to handle all of that for me, that is why I can just let them go without the semicolon. But if you are using actual raw SQL, it's going to run into error if you don't provide the semicolon. Right, now we need to provide this parameter. So we're going to have an array here. The first parameter we need is the user ID. All right, so this is going to be user ID. The second is the email. Okay, and then we have the token. All right, so those are the parameters that we need. Okay, so if all of those operations are successful, then we need to commit our database transaction. All right, so we have await client.query, then we are going to have our commit. Okay, since this function, we need to return our token if everything is successful, so that we can use that token to send a verification mail to our user. Okay, so let's add a return data type here. Since this is an asynchronous function, so it's going to return a promise. All right, so this promise is going to resolve to an array of this is going to be a string that is going to be the token if there is no error. But if there is an error, then we're going to pass this as an error. Okay, but if if there is no error, so we're going to return the token as the first item, and then we're going to return null to stand in for no error. All right, but if there is an error, so our token is going to be null, and then we're going to return error here. Okay, so that's going to be the returned data type. So if we after committing this, that means there is no error, then we're going to return an array of our token with null because there is no error. Okay, but if there is an error, so we are first going to console log our error. Right, so we have console.error. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be string. Like I said, this console statement is just for debugging, just in case we run into error while we are doing this during development. In production, you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, you shouldn't be logging unnecessarily. So before logging, let's roll back our transaction. Okay, so we are going to have await client.query. All right, so what is going to be our query? We need to roll back our transaction. All right, and then after that we need to return from the function. Okay, so I'm going to have, what are we returning? An array. Since there is an error, so our token is going to be null, then we're going to be returning this error. So let's assert that it's of data type error. Okay, so TypeScript can shut up. So just before we let go from this function, if you look at this line, you see that this is also an asynchronous operation, and this operation, there is since it is asynchronous, there is a possibility that there can be error during the execution of this query. There can be network error, since we are calling it in the catch block, so the error is unhandled. All right, and though it is very unlikely that an error can occur, but we can still not say 100% that there will never and never be an error. So we need to put this in its own try catch block. All right, we need to put it in a try block. And since it's just a single line asynchronous operation, and we also be having series of single lines asynchronous operation like this, so rather than writing and rewriting try catch block over and over again, we can just create a utility function, just like a try catch wrapper, to be wrapping all of our single line asynchronous operations. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to create a dedicated function. All right, I'm going to go to our library directory. Here we are going to create a file. We are going to call it try catch. Okay, so the catch now is a capital letter C. All right, this is actually not part of the old thing, so not to waste our time, I'm just going to paste the asynchronous function. Okay, so what do we have here? We have an asynchronous function with the name of try catch. Okay, so the function is receiving another function as a parameter. All right, and the function is going to resolve to a certain data type that is going to be the result of the asynchronous function passed as a parameter. Okay, so we are executing the function, executing it in a try catch block. All right, so the function is executed in the try part. All right, and what are we returning? We are returning an array. That is why we have this return statement. The asynchronous function is eventually going to return a promise, and the promise is going to resolve into this data type result, and the data type result is going to be an array. All right, so the first item is going to be the actual data that is being returned from the synchronous function, or null. Yes, data type and null. So this null is signifying that there was no error when executing the function. Or so we have an array that is going to have null as its first item. So this null is signifying that there is no data, which means an error occurred. So the result of this function is going to be an array. The first item is going to be the data, and the second item is going to be the error. So if there is a data, that means there is no error. But if there is no data, that means there is an error. So in the try part, we are returning data and null since there is no error. But if there is an error, we are returning null as the data, and then we are returning the error. Okay, so we're just going to be using this function now to wrap all of our single lines asynchronous operations, so that we don't have to be writing try and catch again and again. So what we are going to do is we are going to wrap this in the try catch function. Okay, the one with capital letter C that we just created. Okay, so I'm going to say this is a function, so we have a equal sign there. Okay, and then I'm going to wrap this in the parentheses. All right, so now this query now is being executed in a try catch block. All right, so this is going to save us from writing try catch over and over again. Okay, so now we've updated the existing user entry. Now let's continue with our execution. Okay, so after adding this, we are going to check if there was an error while updating the existing user entry. Okay, so we're going to say if add localhost error is true, that means an error occurred while doing that. So we're going to release our connection back to the pool. Okay, and then we're going to return the generic error response. Okay, that is what we defined up here. Where is it? Okay, so that is what we defined up there. Okay, so if this condition is not true, that means there was no error when adding the user to the database. Then we are going to be sending a verification mail. Okay, so send verification mail to the user. All right, so we're also going to be doing that in a separate function itself. Right, so we're going to have the name of the function is going to be, so we're going to call it send verification. Okay, verification mail. All right, and for the function, we're going to be passing the user email and the verification token we generated earlier. All right, so we return the token as part of the result of this function. Okay, so it's going to be an asynchronous operation. So now let's come down here and then create. You see why I'm wrapping all of those functionalities in separate functions. Imagine we have to write all of this code also in this block. So this server action is going to be overpopulated. So we can just put all those functionalities in their dedicated function. So if you so wish now, you can just cut all of this out and put it in a dedicated file. Even though I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to leave everything here. Okay, there should be some, it's not giving me. Okay, this is it here. So you can just cut all of this out and put it in a dedicated file and then import the function. Okay, so this makes the whole thing much more modular. All right, so that's one of the advantages of having different functions. Okay, so now here let's define a function. So we have a synchronous, a sync, okay, function, a sync function statement. Okay, so the name is send verification mail, and we accepted the email, which is going to be of data type string. We also accepted the token, which is also of the data type string. Okay, so this one is not returning anything. You can just put void there, but we can as well leave it. Okay, so yeah, this is where we are going to be using our transporter that we created in the last video. So we're going to have a email transporter, or let me call it transporter. That is what this one, remember. So transporter dot send mail. All right, we're going to be passing some parameters to it. So it is expecting our from, that is the sender of the email. Okay, so we have that in our environment variable. So we're going to have env, okay, this is it here, dot smtp user, and that is going to be your own email address. Okay, just like I have my own email address that we used to create our password the other time. Okay, so that is going to be your email address. That's the sender. I've always preferred this to be just env rather than env server. Okay, so to prevent this from reoccurring, let's just go to our env server file. Okay, I don't want it to be importing as env server. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to say, let me just get rid of all this. I'm going to define a variable here. So I'm going to say const env. Okay, so that, and then I'm going to export default, all right, env. Okay, so with that now, okay, so I can just say env now, and then so you can see that we have it now as env. So we have smtp user, that is going to be our email address. There is an error at the top here, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so now we've provided the from, that is the sender of the email. Okay, if possibly you are working for an organization, you have a custom email address, so that is what you are going to provide as the from. So this is the person you are sending the email address to, and that is going to be the email address provided by the user. So this is going to be the subject of our email. Okay, so like I said, I've already prepared an email template for you. Email template, where is it? Okay, this is it. So we have this for sign up. Okay, so we have this object. Inside of the object we have subjects. Okay, we have text, and we have HTML. So we are going to import this object. Okay, we're going to import that into our server action. Okay, so we have sign up verification from email template. So this dot subject, I already have a subject prepared there. Okay, and the text is going to be sign up verification dot text. But if you look at the text, you will realize that it's a function that is accepting an object. Okay, the object is the confirmation link. You can get rid of this to just make it an ordinary parameter, but I think this is going to make it much more clearer. So we have a confirm link. I hope I get the spelling correct. So the confirm link is going to be, we're going to be using template literals for that. So we have interpolation, so that's going to be env dot base, that is the base URL for the whole app. Okay, then we are going to have verify email, that is going to be the verified email path. Okay, now we are going to create a page to verify our user email, and then we are going to pass the token as a param. All right, slash params. Okay, so we have equal to, then we have this. Okay, you can also use encode URI components, okay, just to standardize it. Okay, so this is going to be the it's accepting this, so it's going to pass that as part of the it's going to pass that as the href of our confirmation link. Okay, so after that we need to pass the HTML. Okay, so we're also going to have sign up verification. Okay, dot HTML. The HTML is also a function that is expecting the same parameter. Okay, so I'm going to just paste that in there. All right, so now we are good with sending our verification mail. Okay, so where did we call the function? We called it at this point, but you can see this is also this is an asynchronous operation that is happening here, so we need to wrap this also in a try catch. Okay, we are just going to use the utility function that we created earlier, so we are just going to wrap this here rather than writing another try catch. Okay, so we're going to have a try catch. That is the utility function we created. Okay, so this is going to be a function, and I'm going to wrap this in a parenthesis. Okay, so this try catch function is going to return an array that contains either there is an error or there is no error. So we need to check if an error occurred while sending the verification mail, because it won't make sense if we created the user in our database and an error occurred while sending verification mail and the user couldn't verify their account. So we're going to call this email error. So if an error occurred while sending the verification, then we are just going to remove the user we just created in our database. So if an error occurs, we're going to say if email error. Okay, so we are going to remove the user from our database. Okay, it's very important that the email is successful. So I'm going to say if email error, that means an error occurred while sending the verification mail. So we're going to first log before removing the user from our database. All right, so I'm going to say email sending, an error occurred sending email. Okay, so let's just log the error. So I'm going to have a email error. Okay, there should be a comma here. All right, and after logging that, we need to remove the user from our database because the user will not be able to verify their account. So we need to remove the user from our database. So I'm going to create a separate function for that. Also, we're going to say remove local auth. Intentionally use the longer name so that it's self-descriptive. Okay, so we are going to pass database connection to it. Okay, and we're also going to pass the user ID. That is what we are going to use to remove the user from the database. Now we need to define this function. Okay, but before we define that, let's just conclude this part. Okay, so we are going to release after removing the user from the database, we need to release our database connection back to the connection pool. And then we're going to be returning an error response. So we're going to have success to be false, okay, because we couldn't send the verification mail. Okay, and then we're going to have this errors object, which is having this. So this is going to be an array of strings. So we're going to say failed to send verification email. Okay, so please provide a valid email address. Possibly it is the email address that is invalid, or contact support, okay, so that they can assist you. Okay, and after that we need to provide data to persist the data in the form. Okay, so data is going to be same as what we been writing here. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. All right, so now we need to define our function. There should be a comma there. Okay, I'm going to come here. Let me just copy the name of the function, remove local auth from existing user. Okay, so we're going to have an asynchronous function. Okay, so this is going to be the name. What is it accepting? It's accepting, where is it? The database connection and the user ID. Okay, so we're going to say this is client. Okay, the data type is going to be pool client. All right, and the user ID, which is a number. All right, so here we are going to have our try catch statements, our normal try catch now, because we are going to be having several lines of asynchronous functions here. So we'll not be using our custom wrapper. So we have client.query. Since we want to perform operations on two separate tables, and both of them must be successful or both of them must not be successful. Okay, so we are going to be using query for database transaction for that. So either both operations are successful or both operations are not successful. Just in case you stumbled on the code, you'll be able to understand what's happened there. Comment, yeah, I almost forgot that. So now we first need to remove the auth method from the users table. Okay, so we are going to have an update query here, update the users table. So what are the things we want to update? We need to first clear the password hash. Okay, since it wasn't successful. Actually, this part is not so much important, this removing local auth from existing user, but just to make sure that your system is much more robust. Okay, so you need to do this, but it's actually not that compulsory. Okay, so we need to set email verified to null, and then we need to remove a local from the auth providers array providers. Okay, so it's going to be array remove. Okay, then we're going to pass the previous of providers array. Okay, and then what are we removing? Removing local. Okay, which is also of the custom data type of provider. So which exact user we want to update? That's where the where clause comes in. So ID equals $1. So we'll be providing the ID as a parameter to avoid SQL injection. All right, so now we've removed what's happening here. This expression is not callable. Okay, so now we've removed the local auth method from the users table. We also need to delete the entry from the email verifications table. So we can say delete. Okay, so we're going to have another query here. So clients.query. Okay, then so we're going to have a delete statement. So we're going to say delete from email verifications table verifications. Okay, where user id equals $1. So we also pass that as a parameter. So this is going to be the user id that we accepted as a parameter. This is supposed to be inside of this. Okay, now if both operations are successful, we need to commit our query. So our operations. Okay, so client.query, then we are going to commit them. Okay, but if an error occurred, then we need to roll back our operation. So we can just copy that from this point, since it's also a rollback statement, and we need to wrap that in a try catch, just in case we have an unfortunate situation where an error occurred with our connection. Okay, with our operation. So here we're going to say error removing. Okay, so now we are done with removing local auth from existing users. Okay, so let's go back to our server action. Okay, so you can see all this logic. Now you can see the numerous number of lines that we've taken out of our server action. You can as well create dedicated files for all of these functions and move them there and import them into this server action. Now, you know what we did, removing the user was done if an error occurred while sending verification mail. So if there was no error while sending verification mail, that means the whole process of creating the user account is successful. So adding the user to the database and sending email, that means both of them are successful at this point. So after this point, now we are going to send a success response back to our user. So now let's locate the closing point of this conditional statement. This is the closing point. Okay, so now we need to send a success response back to this. But before we send the response, we need to release our database connection back to the pool so that it will be available for subsequent operations, either from another user or from the same user that is performing an operation that involves database interaction. Okay, so now our success is going to be true. Then we're going to pass a success message. So we're going to say sign up. So now, what are we left with? We are left with oh sorry, I've gotten out of that. So we are left with if there is no existing user in the database at all. What we've been doing up to this point is if there is an existing user in the database. Okay, this is where we check if there is an existing user. This is where we handled if the user already has a local authentication method, and this is where we handled if the user does not have a local authentication method. So now the only remaining condition now is if the user does not have an account with us at all before. Okay, so this is where we are going to be handling that. All right, we're almost done. Okay, so here this is where we are going to create a new user afresh. Okay, we're also going to be putting that in a dedicated function of its own. So the function is going to be returning the token, all right, which is what we're going to send as part of the verification email to the user. So token and error, if there is an error that occurred during the process. Okay, so we're going to call this function create new user with local auth. Okay, so I made sure that the name of the function is descriptive. So we first pass the database client, the connection, we pass the email, we pass the name of the user, and we're also going to pass the password. So now we are going to be defining the function. Okay, so we are going to come here. I'm supposed to have copied the name of that function, a synchronous function. I think it is create new user with local auth. All right, and what are the parameters it is accepting? Okay, client email name and password, client email name and password. Okay, so this is going to be clients. Okay, this is going to be of data type pool clients. What is the order again? I think it is name, email, and password. The order is very important since we are just passing it literally. Okay, so we have email, name. I think I missed it. I think I missed the order. Okay, this is why we use object most of the time, so that you don't have to take note of the order. Email, name, and password. I think I'm actually correct. Okay, so we have a string. Okay, this all of them going to be string. All right, and this is going to also be string. So this function also is going to be returning the same data type as this, a promise that is either string or null and error, string and null and error, just in case an error occurred. Okay, so inside of this function, just almost same as this, so we're also going to create a token we'll hash our password. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, all right, up to this point. So both of them are almost same. All right, what did I do? Oh, I think I made a mistake there. I'm going to come here, I'm going to paste that. All right, so I'm going to have my catch statement. Okay, catch my error. Catch my error. Okay, then we're going to have that. So for now, let's deal with this. Okay, so we've gotten our token, we've hashed our password, we've started the transaction. Now we need to insert a new database, a new user into our database. Okay, so we are going to let's add a comment. Okay, so we're going to say add a new let me add fresh. It almost look like tautology. You add a new fresh user to database. Okay, so here we're going to await, and we're going to have clients dot query. Okay, so here we're going to write a query. Okay, so we are going to be inserting into the users table. So what are the things we want to insert? We need to insert the name, the email, the password, hash. Okay, and we need to provide the auth providers, which is going to be an array of local. Then we are going to provide email verifier. We need to set that to false. Okay, so values is going to be parameters. Okay, so the email is going to be parameter. What else? The email is also going to be parameter. Password hash. Okay, this is also going to be parameter. We could have embed them, but for the risk of SQL injection, we can't do all that. Okay, and auth provider. So this is going to be okay, we're also going to make that a parameter. Okay, $4, while email verify, this is just going to be false. That's Boolean value. Okay, so those are the values. Okay, and then now we need to return the ID so that we can use that to create an entry in our email verifications table. So we need to return the user ID, that is the new user that is just created. So now we need to provide our parameter. So the name, that is the first parameter. We've accepted that as a parameter to the parent function. And what next? The email. Okay, so we need to pass the email. What next? The password hash. That is the hash password we just did here. Okay, and what is the next? Auth providers. That is going to be an array, and inside of that array, we're going to have local. Okay, now that is going to create the new user for us, but mind you, we are returning the ID of the newly created user. So let's get that out of here. So we're going to say const rows. Okay, so equals to that. So we are going to use that ID as part of the entry we'll be inserting into the email verification. So we're going to await clients.query. All right, if you take notes, you see that I've disabled my GitHub Copilot so that it doesn't interfere with what we are doing here. Okay, it's good for when you are doing personal work. All right, for tutorials like this, it's going to be disrupting your workflow. All right, so we have a user ID. Okay, we have email, we have token. All right, and we also have expires at. All right, and the values is going to be, so the first one is the user ID, so we're going to provide that as a parameter. The second one is the email, also as a parameter. So the third one is the token, also as a parameter. Expire at is just going to be our present time represented with the now function. Okay, plus 15 minutes interval. So we are going to have plus interval. Okay, so we have a 15 minutes. Okay, so that's that for that. Now we need to provide our parameters. The first parameter is the user ID. Okay, we are getting that as inside of this row. Now this row is going to be an array of objects, so we're going to have rows. So the first object in that row dot ID. Okay, if you want type safety here, you can just say this query is going to be returning. Okay, it's going to be returning an array of object that looks like this. So we are going to have ID, which is going to be a number. All right, so at this point now you are going to have type safety. So now you see ID. Okay, now the second parameter we'll be providing is going to be the email. All right, and the last parameter is going to be the token. Okay, so that's that for that. Now if both, okay, we can also add comments. Yes, so we're going to say, all right, so if both operations are successful, we need to commit our transaction client.query, then we commit that. All right, so now we need to return an array. Okay, an array of our token and null, because there is no error at this point. But if there is an error, we need to undo that inside of this place. So we're going to have console. All right, we need to log that to the console. What is the problem here? Why is this one unreachable? Okay, so we have try. Okay, our try is not closing. All right, so I need to close that part. Okay, so we have console.error. All right, and then we're going to say error creating new user. All right, so we need to pass error so that we see the actual error. Now we need to roll back our transaction, so we can just copy that at this line. Okay, so we just paste it here. All right, so we roll back our transaction if a transaction has started. Okay, and then we're going to be returning an array of null and error. So I'm going to have null because at the time our operation was not successful. Okay, so that's that for creating new user with local auth. All right, so we're going to go back to our server action now. Okay, so we've just implemented this. So on this point, if there is an error creating new user, so I'm going to say if create new user is true. If create new user error is true, that means there was an error creating new user. So we are going to release our connection back to the pool. All right, and then we need to return a error response. So I'm just going to use the generic error response we created earlier. So this is for if there was an error creating the new user. But if there was no error, that means this statement will not run. Then we are going to send a verification email to the user. So we're going to say const. All right, it's going to be, we don't need the data, but we want to check if there is an email error. So I'm going to say email error. All right, I'm going to use our custom try catch statement to send verification try catch functionality. Okay, so this is going to be a function. All right, then we're going to say send verification mail. What is this function accepting? It is accepting send verification mail is accepting the email and the token. Okay, so we are going to pass the user email, okay, and the token. All right, so okay, so this is the token. All right, okay, now if there is an error sending this verification mail, just like we did there, that we remove the local auth from existing user, this one will be much more easier. We are just going to delete the user from the database, and it is going to cascade delete the email verifications entry. So I'm going to say if email error is true. All right, if email error is true, then we're going to just delete the user. So we're going to say, let's use a code block there. We're going to say await try catch. Okay, we're going to use our custom try catch function. Okay, so here we're going to have a client dot query. Okay, so I'm just going to delete just the user. So on cascade, it's going to delete the email verification since it's a new user anyways. So we don't need to don't need to be so don't need to go the long route. Okay, so we're just going to say delete from users. Okay, this is the name of the table. Okay, so where email equals $1. Okay, so I'm going to provide the email as a parameter. All right, so that is going to delete the user from the users table, and on cascade is going to delete the email verification entry. So after deleting the user, so we're going to release our connection back to the pool. Okay, client dot release. Okay, so we release that back to the pool. Then we're going to return an error statement, okay, to tell the user that account creation was not successful. All right, so our errors, you might be wondering, why do we have to have a complex structure for error? It is just to model our error as in the same manner as the result error, so that we can just pass down our result error easily. Okay, so we have failed. All right, now we need to send down our data. So I'm going to come after here. I'm going to say data is going to be, that's just the same as what we've been having up there. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all of this. All right, and then I'm going to paste them here. So if there was no error while sending the verification mail, that means the account creation was successful and the email verification sending was successful. So now we need to send a success message to our user that sign up was successful. But before we send the verification mail, we need to finally release database connection back to the pool. Okay, so that is going to release our connection. Then we're going to say voila, your sign up was successful. So you need to check your email, for verification. Okay, so now we've come to the end of this server action. What we need to do now is to just test out our server action. Okay, but just before we test it, okay, I want us to console log the structure of our user, even though we want to create a new user, a new fresh user. So let's go to where, okay, let's just try to create the same user twice. So I want to show you the structure of our user. This is where we got our user. Okay, so this is existing user equals rows. Let me log our rows here. Okay, so I'm going to have console dot log. Okay, so I'm going to have a rows that is going to be an array of objects. Okay, but initially when we are creating a new user afresh, it's going to be an empty array. You can see now that we have email transporter is ready. This is the verification we did in our the transporter file, email transporter. Okay, so where is it? Okay, so we did a little verification there. If the connection is successful, we are going to have this. If it is not successful, you have error with email transporter. Okay, so that is the function of that. With this now, you know that your email transporter is ready to go. Okay, so I'm just going to close that. All right, let me refresh this. Okay, so what do we have? Let's say my name is this, my email address is this. I'm just going to say password. Okay, and the password. All right, let's see if we are good to go. Okay, an error occurred. Please try again. Let's see what was the error. Inconsistent types induced for parameter 1. Okay, that is where we want to add email verification entry into the database line 291. line 291. Let's go to line 291. Okay, insert into email verifications. Okay, user id email token. All right, so this is the integer versus variable character. Okay, so it's telling us that this id now is what we are getting is a variable character rather than returning id. Let's log this row and see. So we have our console. I'm not supposed to having that error. So let's see what we are getting as our rows. Okay, inside is the first one, email is the second, and token is the third. Yeah, and it's telling us that we are getting variable character rather than integer. Okay, so let's see what is the problem. I'm going to try to do that again and see the structure of. Okay, so you can see our id is actually an integer. Oh, I see where the problem is now. This is supposed to be $2. Okay, so it is not passing the user id as the email. Email is supposed to be string. That is variable character in database terms, and now we were passing an integer, which is the data. Okay, so that is where the problem is. Okay, all right, so now it's supposed to be successful now. So you can see sign up success. We check your email for verifications. Let me zoom that in. Okay, so you can see that here. All right. I think there is a little mismatch here. You can see that our toast is actually white. You can leave it like this if you so wish, but I want it to be black. So this is actually using the Sonar package directly from Sonar, not the custom one from shardcn. Okay, but our verification now is now successful. Okay, so this is the structure of the data we got at this point. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this now, but before we change our Sonar, okay, let's just change the Sonar. So we're going to go to layout. So we are supposed to, okay, this is the problem. We are not supposed to import directly from Sonar, but the one that is from shardcn. Okay, so I'm going to have components, okay, and then it's going to be UI, okay, then I'm going to have Sonar. Okay, so that is the custom one from shardcn. Okay, so now we now have an account. Initially, when we did not have an account, the user row was an empty row. Okay, local sign up. That's we have a cons at the top when we were checking if there is an existing user. Okay, it should be on top of this. Okay, this is where we check if there's an existing user. This is the console log. So you can see that this row was an empty array because there was no existing user with that email. But now we now have an existing user with that email. So if I try to create another account with the same email address, now we are supposed to run into error that there is an existing user with that email. Okay, but it's going to redirect us because the account is not verified yet. So at this point, it's going to redirect us. Okay, so let me try that again now. So you can see that we are redirected into the verification required page. This is 404 because we did not, we haven't created that page. Okay, and this is the structure of the user we got at this point. Where is it? Okay, at this point, this is the structure of this row. You can see it's an array of objects. Each object is now standing for a user, and you can see now that our auth providers is a normal JavaScript array. So it was turned into a normal JavaScript array using this parser. Assuming we were not using this parser, we are going to get that as a string. Okay, now let me get rid of this. Okay, for now, just so that you can see the structure of the database. All right, so I'm going to try that again. Okay, so this is going to password, and this is going to be password, so that you can see the function of that parser. Okay, let's try to sign up again. Okay, so we still have it as, I think it's because that has been compiled already. Let me try to see what we can do fast. Okay, I'm going to delete this next package, this next directory. Okay, now I'm going to start my server again. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sign up. Okay, so let's try to do this one more time. Just want to show you the function of that parser. All right, this video is already long enough. Should be closing now. Okay, let me refresh this. Okay, I've deleted the next directory, so that page was from another version of the app. So now this is what I want to show you. You can see now that auth providers is a string rather than being a JavaScript array. So this is the structure of Postgres array. It is somewhat like a string, but it uses this syntax for its own array. So it is now the function of that parser to turn that Postgres array format, to turn this format into a normal JavaScript format. So that's just what I want to show you. Okay, so that's all for this video. Don't forget to give this a like and subscribe to the channel, so that as subsequent videos will be coming up, you'll be notified as they are coming up. All right, so thanks for subscribing, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.